Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave and this is my daily ruling. Today's question comes to us from the True Stories collection, as in it actually happened at an event that I was actually judging. Amy plays as Sheltered by Ghosts, enchanting her grizzly bears and exiling Nick's Llanowar elves. Then Amy plays Temporary Lockdown. What happens when Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield? What happens when it leaves? When Temporary Lockdown enters, its ability will exile all the non-land permanents with mana value 2 or less. At that time, there are two such permanents, grizzly bears and Sheltered by Ghosts. One important thing to note is that Temporary Lockdown only uses the verb exile once, so both of these will be exiled together as part of the same game event. After Sheltered by Ghosts leaves the battlefield, the effect that exiled Llanowar elves will expire, so the elf will return to the battlefield. Since Temporary Lockdown exiles everything all at once, Llanowar elves will stay on the battlefield. It won't be exiled by Temporary Lockdown 2, since it wasn't in play during the one time when Lockdown was exiling everything. When Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield, grizzly bears and Sheltered by Ghosts will both return to the battlefield. Since they were exiled together as part of the same game event, that means they will return simultaneously after the lockdown leaves. That could be a bit of a problem for Amy because when an aura is entering the battlefield by any means other than resolving as an aura spell, its controller has to choose an object that it could legally enchant as it enters the battlefield. If Amy has a creature already in play, she could have the Sheltered by Ghosts enter attached to that creature, but she could not have it enter attached to the grizzly bears. Remember that Amy has to choose something as Sheltered by Ghosts enters the battlefield. In other words, during the process of it entering, i.e. before it is fully entered. It is not possible to choose grizzly bears because it is entering simultaneously with Sheltered by Ghosts. Therefore, it is not yet a creature that Amy controls at the time she has to make that choice. In the case where an aura is entering the battlefield and there is no legal object for it to enchant, it will stay in its current zone. So, if Amy does not have any creatures for the Sheltered by Ghosts to enter attached to, that aura will just remain in her exile zone indefinitely. Well, that's pretty interesting, but when I was writing this script, I remembered that there was another way that Wizards sometimes accomplishes similar effects to Temporary Lockdown, which is by using the phasing mechanic. So let's take a look at this card that I'd made up, and imagine what would change about the scenario from the original problem statement if Amy had played just a phase rather than Temporary Lockdown. First off, whenever a permanent phases out, anything attached to that permanent phases out with it. This process is called phasing out indirectly, as opposed to phasing out directly, which is where an effect just says that a specific permanent phases out. Now, when a permanent is supposed to phase out directly and indirectly at the same time, it just phases out indirectly. So that means that when the just a phase enters the battlefield, the grizzly bears would phase out directly and the Sheltered by Ghosts would phase out indirectly. Why is this important? Because objects that phase out indirectly don't phase back in by themselves. They phase in along with the permanents they phased out attached to, and they remain attached. This means that when the just a phase leaves the battlefield, the grizzly bears and the Sheltered by Ghosts will both phase back in, with the Sheltered by Ghosts still attached to the grizzly bears. Sadly, phasing in does not count as Sheltered by Ghosts entering the battlefield, so you would not get to exile another creature here. Neither does phasing out count as leaving the battlefield, meaning that the Llanowar elves that was exiled with Sheltered by Ghosts would not get to come back. Pretty cool how such a minor difference radically changes the answer, right? And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.